I'm Claudia Ortiz, 38, and I built a stable life from the ground up, steady job, loving marriage, and a home that felt safe. For years, I supported my twin sister through her divorce, her job loss, even let her live with us rent-free. But when she stood up at Sunday dinner, smiled, and said she was pregnant with my husband's child, I made a choice that changed everything. Ever trusted someone so deeply they knew exactly how to break you? If you've been there, drop your story in the comments. I see you. Before we get into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to protect your peace after being betrayed, tap that like button and subscribe. What happened next, you won't believe. My name is Claudia Ortiz, and for most of my life, my identity was tied to being one half of a matching set. Claudia and Sophia, the twins. From the moment we were born, people grouped us together like we were a single unit. It never bothered me. If anything, it felt comforting. She was the louder one, the risk-taker. I was more grounded, more careful. We balanced each other out. Growing up, we shared everything, from bunk beds to birthday cakes to whispered secrets under the covers after our parents had gone to bed. When we were 12, our mother caught us switching clothes to play a prank on our math teacher. She scolded us, but we could barely keep a straight face, and later that night we high-fived in the dark, proud of how well we'd pulled it off. That was just who we were. Always a team. Even in high school, when most sisters drift apart, we stayed close. I went out for yearbook, she joined theater. She was the lead in the spring musical, and I stayed up with her past midnight helping her memorize her lines. I remember thinking there was nothing I wouldn't do for her. That instinct stayed with me into adulthood. It just evolved. After college, I settled into a marketing job and eventually married Eli. He was steady, kind, charming in a quiet way. We met at a client event. I was the junior associate. He was already a partner. We kept it professional at first, but after 6 months of mutual side glances and banter during post-meeting coffees, he asked me out. 2 years later, we were married in a small ceremony in Asheville. Sophia stood next to me as my maid of honor. She wore a dark green dress I'd picked out, hair pinned back with a few loose curls, and toasted us with tears in her eyes. To Claudia and Eli, she said, raising her glass. The one love story that actually makes me believe in love again. Everyone clapped, and I believed every word she said. Eli and Sophia got along well, or so I thought. He'd tease her about her dramatic dating life. She'd tease him about being too uptight. It was light, familiar. I never picked up on anything more than that. Over the years, she went through one relationship after another, none lasting more than a year. She'd joke about being cursed, that no man ever wanted to deal with a woman and her twin sister. I used to laugh along with her, not realizing that somewhere under those jokes was resentment. Her divorce was messy. 2 years after marrying a freelance artist she met at a gallery opening, she called me in tears. "He's gone," she said. "He left. Took his stupid paintings and disappeared." I invited her over that night. We opened a bottle of wine, sat on my porch, and she cried until she couldn't anymore. "You're lucky," she said, her head resting on my shoulder. "Eli would never do this to you." I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed her hand. A few months later, when her lease was up and she couldn't afford rent alone, she asked if she could stay with us for a little while. "Just a few weeks," she promised. "Until I get back on my feet." Eli and I talked it over. He was hesitant, but I insisted. "It's my sister," I said. "It won't be forever." She moved into our guest room the next week. She brought 3 suitcases, a box of books, and her favorite mug, a chipped ceramic thing from a roadside diner. At first, it felt easy. Comfortable, even. We cooked dinner together, watched Netflix on the couch, and sometimes she'd bring home pastries from the cafe near her temp job. She made herself useful, doing laundry, helping clean, running errands when I was swamped at work. Eli would joke that it felt like we had a live-in assistant. I reminded him she wasn't here to serve us. "She's family," I said. "She's been through a lot." The weeks turned into months. Then a full year. She bounced from job to job, always with an excuse. The boss was sexist, the hours were insane, the pay was a joke. I kept covering small things here and there. A phone bill. groceries, new tires for her car. I didn't even realize how much I was giving until Eli brought it up during a late-night budgeting session. You know, we've spent over $4,000 this year just bailing Sophia out of things, he said, showing me a spreadsheet he'd been keeping. This can't go on forever, Claudia. I defended her, like always. She's had a rough time, I said. She just needs more stability. She'll find something steady soon. Or she won't, he said, not unkindly. And we'll still be footing the bill. I hated the way that conversation made me feel, torn between the man I'd built a life with and the woman I'd grown up beside. But I told myself it was temporary, that she just needed a little more time. Around that same period, Eli started working from home more often. His firm was downsizing office space and giving senior partners the option to go remote. I thought it would be nice to have him around more breakfasts together, more time as a couple. But the change created a new dynamic. He and Sophia were in the house together most days while I was at the office. I never saw it as a problem. I trusted both of them. I never questioned that trust. I should have. There were little things. A joke I didn't get because it happened earlier today, shared glances I chalked up to sibling-like camaraderie. Once, I walked in on them in the kitchen, laughing a little too hard at something. They went quiet when they saw me. "What's so funny?" I asked, setting down my keys. "Nothing," they both said, almost in unison. Still, I brushed it off. This was Sophia. My sister. The one I'd moved heaven and earth to help. The one who held my hand during my miscarriage 3 years earlier. The one who toasted my marriage like it was her own. And this was Eli, my husband of 15 years. The man who remembered how I took my coffee, who never forgot an anniversary, who held me at night like I was something worth protecting. I didn't see it coming. Not even close. The Sunday it all changed was supposed to be ordinary. We were hosting family dinner, something we did once a month. Sophia offered to cook. She made pasta from scratch, her specialty. "I have a surprise," she said, setting the pot down on the table. "But I'm going to wait until dessert." We all laughed, assuming she was going to announce a new job or maybe a vacation she'd saved up for. Even Eli looked amused. We made it through the meal, salad, pasta, wine. Everyone was relaxed, chatting, catching up. Then, during dessert, she stood up and clinked her spoon against her glass. "I have news," she said, smiling. I remember reaching for my wine. I remember Eli's hand tightening slightly around his fork. I remember thinking, she looks too happy. "I'm pregnant," she said, hand over her stomach. The room went silent. Then she added, "And the father is Eli." No one spoke. No one moved. I watched her smile widen like it was some twisted performance, like she was proud. I finished my wine. I stood up. I said nothing. And then I walked out of the room to make a phone call. Because while she thought that moment would destroy me, she didn't realize it had only just begun to unravel what I'd built. And what I was about to do next would be remembered far longer than her announcement ever would. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't start with a grand gesture. It starts small, almost invisible. The kind of changes you can convince yourself you're imagining until you can't anymore. A few months before that Sunday dinner, I started noticing things. Sophia had been living with us for over a year at that point. And while it wasn't always seamless, we had found a rhythm. She cooked a couple nights a week, helped with laundry, even got along with Eli in a way that felt easy. Too easy, maybe. But at the time, I told myself that was a good thing. It started with how she reacted to him. The way she laughed at his jokes, louder than before, longer than anyone else at the table. It wasn't just amusement, it was something closer to performance. As if she were auditioning for something. I'd be mid-sentence, telling Eli about something from work, and she'd interrupt, finishing my sentence or pivoting the conversation toward herself. One night, we were talking about a weekend trip we had coming up, just the two of us, and she chimed in, "Oh, I love that cabin. Maybe I'll tag along and work remotely from there too." She said it like a joke, but the look on her face didn't match the tone. I remember glancing at Eli, expecting him to laugh it off, to say it was our getaway. But instead, he smiled awkwardly and said, "The Wi-Fi's decent enough, I guess." And that was it. I brought it up to him later. Not the cabin comment, specifically, but the general shift. How she seemed to be stepping into our space a little more, physically, emotionally, conversationally. He brushed it off. She's lonely, Claudia. She's been through hell. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm not trying to, I said. It just feels off. Like she doesn't know where the boundaries are anymore. She's your sister. She's not doing anything wrong. That became a recurring phrase. She's your sister. As if that absolved her from everything. Looking back, I think he wanted to believe that. Maybe he needed to. Because if she was just a sister trying to cope, then he wasn't doing anything wrong either. And if I was the only one who noticed, then maybe I was the problem. I started second-guessing myself. Every time I caught a lingering look between them, I told myself I was tired. Every time she found an excuse to touch him, a hand on the arm during a story, a playful shove when he made a joke, I told myself she was just affectionate. That this was normal. But it didn't feel normal. Once, I walked into the living room unexpectedly. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd gone upstairs to put away laundry and came back down to find them sitting close on the couch. Not touching, but closer than I'd ever seen them. The TV was on, but neither of them was watching it. When they heard me, they pulled apart slightly, subtly, but I noticed. Eli stood up quickly, walked into the kitchen, and asked if I needed help with anything. Later, when I brought it up again, he sighed. Claudia, you're making something out of nothing. You're working crazy hours, you're exhausted, this is just stress talking. That shut me up for a while. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. Work had been intense. I'd been managing a difficult campaign at the agency and barely sleeping. But even then, I knew it wasn't just stress. It was instinct. And I wasn't ready to listen to it yet. Then she moved out. It was abrupt. No warning, no discussion. Just a text on a Tuesday afternoon that read, "Hey, found a sublet. Moving out this weekend. Hope that's okay." I stared at my phone for a full minute before calling her. What's going on? Nothing, she said. I just need my own space again. It's time. You've done more than enough. You could have talked to me first. I didn't want to make it a thing. It's a good deal, and I move Saturday. I'll be fine. When I got home that night, she was boxing up her things like it was a casual spring cleaning. I offered to help, but she waved me off. Eli already said he'd give me a hand, she said, without looking up. I remember standing there, unsure of what to say. I wanted to ask why she hadn't said anything sooner. Why she hadn't talked to me before involving him. But I didn't. I just nodded. That weekend, she left. No big goodbye. No thank you for the year of free rent, the groceries, the bills I covered. Just a few texts about where she left her key and a reminder that she still had some boxes in the garage. When I mentioned to Eli that I was surprised she hadn't said more, he shrugged. She's trying to be independent again. Let her. And just like that, she was gone. But the weird part was how present she still felt. Eli started getting more distracted. He was on his phone more often, stepping outside for calls that didn't seem work-related. Once, I found a receipt from a coffee shop near her new place. He said he'd been in the area and grabbed a drink. She wasn't even there, he added, unprompted. I hadn't asked. Another time, I came home earlier than expected and found him standing in the kitchen, looking startled. He clicked his phone screen off as I walked in. I asked if everything was okay, and he smiled too fast. Yeah, just talking to Mark about the Henderson project. Mark was on vacation in Italy. I knew that because his wife had posted photos all over Instagram. I didn't say anything in that moment. I wanted to. I even opened my mouth to ask again. But I didn't want to be the jealous wife. The paranoid sister. The one who made accusations without proof. So I said nothing. Instead, I watched. I kept track. I noticed how quickly he replied to texts from unknown numbers. How he suddenly cared more about his appearance when leaving the house, switching cologne, changing shirts if they had a wrinkle, running his hand through his hair twice before grabbing his keys. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. But it was new. One night, I checked his phone. I told myself I was just looking for reassurance. I wanted to find nothing, to feel stupid, even. But what I found wasn't a smoking gun. Just a message. Tomorrow at 3? Usual place. No name, no context. Just enough to make my stomach turn. I didn't confront him. Not then. Not without more. Instead, I saved the number. The next day, I called it from my work phone. She picked up on the third ring. Hello. My chest went tight. I didn't speak. I just hung up. That was when I knew. Not proof in a courtroom sense. Not something I could wave in front of him and demand an answer to. But I knew. Still, I wasn't ready to explode my life over a hunch. So I waited. I watched. I made mental notes. Until that Sunday dinner, when she didn't just burn the bridge, she brought gasoline and a lighter. And finally, I stopped giving them the benefit of the doubt. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. I'd spent the better part of the morning prepping a roast, setting the table, making sure the wine was chilled. Sunday dinners had become a tradition, not weekly, but frequent enough that it felt like something we did to stay connected. My parents were driving in from 2 towns over. My aunt and uncle were bringing dessert. Eli had picked out a bottle of Syrah he claimed would impress my dad. Sophia was bringing salad and a surprise, as she put it in the group text. At the time, I thought it was a joke. She was always dramatic. I figured she'd bring some ridiculous appetizer from a pop-up she found online and expect everyone to pretend to love it. That would have been fine. That would have been manageable. People started arriving around 4. My mom hugged me like she hadn't just seen me 2 weeks prior. The house looks beautiful, she said, stepping out of her shoes at the door. That mirror is new, right? Eli poured drinks, made conversation, helped my dad with the Bluetooth speaker. Sophia showed up last. Hair done. Lipstick on. Dress just formal enough to draw attention, but not enough to make anyone call it out. She walked in like she was hosting. I watched her from the kitchen. She hugged Eli first. It was a second too long. No one else seemed to notice. Dinner itself was uneventful. Comfortable. Laughter around the table. Easy conversation. My uncle told a long-winded story about a neighbor's tree falling on his garage. My mother gave unsolicited advice about a cousin's wedding plans. Eli made a joke that landed well. Sophia filled people's wine glasses with the kind of attentiveness that suggested she wanted them too full to ask questions. And then we got to dessert. My aunt had brought a berry tart. I was slicing it in the kitchen when I heard Sophia's spoon tap against her glass. It wasn't a loud tap, just enough to quiet the hum of conversation. I have a little announcement, she said. I walked back to the dining room, carrying plates. Smiling, because I still thought this was a performance. And it was, just not the kind I was prepared for. She stood, hands folded over her stomach. I'm pregnant. Gasps, followed by clapping. My mom practically leapt out of her seat. My aunt put a hand to her chest. Someone said, congratulations. Someone else asked when she was due. The excitement bubbled instantly, she knew it would. She let it rise. Let it fill the room. And then she looked at me, held my eyes, and said it. Your husband is the father. Everything stopped. No one moved. No one spoke. My mother's hand froze midair. My dad's fork clattered against his plate. Eli didn't say a word. His face went blank, like someone had shut off a light inside him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I just stood there for a moment, looking at her. My sister. My twin. The person who used to sleep beside me when we were kids, who braided my hair for picture day, who I moved into my house without a second thought when she had nowhere else to go. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She was smiling. Eli didn't even look at me. He looked at the table. At his plate. Like if he kept staring hard enough, he could disappear inside it. I finished pouring the wine. Set the bottle down. I'll be right back, I said quietly. I walked into the hallway, closed the door behind me, and took out my phone. I called his mother first. I didn't need theatrics. I needed clarity. She answered on the second ring. Claudia, there's something you should know, I said. I'm only going to say it once. I told her. Briefly. Directly. Then I hung up. Next was his brother. Then his cousin. Then his boss. The calls took less than 5 minutes total. The last one was to a family friend who handled HR at Eli's firm. They played tennis together once a month and drank scotch after. I told her the facts. Told her the names. She didn't say much, just said she'd get back to me. I slid the phone into my pocket, walked into the guest bathroom, and splashed water on my face. My reflection looked unchanged. That surprised me. I had expected something, a visible crack, a tremor in my expression. But I looked exactly the same. I walked back into the dining room. No one had touched their dessert. My father was sitting stiffly, arms crossed. My mother was looking between Eli and Sophia like she couldn't decide who to scold first. My aunt's jaw was tight. My uncle had the wide-eyed look of someone who regretted not staying home. Eli still wouldn't look at me. "Anyone want coffee?" I asked. No one answered. Sophia finally spoke again. "I didn't mean for it to come out like that." I tilted my head. "You didn't mean to announce it at dinner? Or you didn't mean to get pregnant?" She blinked. It felt like the right time. Eli opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother finally said, "We should talk about this privately." I nodded. "Sure." But I didn't sit. I walked to the coat closet, pulled out my bag, and set it on the table. "I'm going to stay with a friend tonight," I said. "Eli, you should find somewhere else too." I assume Sophia has room. He didn't argue. He didn't even try. That told me everything. I looked at my parents. If you decide to support them, do it honestly. Don't pretend you didn't choose a side. My mother opened her mouth. Closed it. I turned to Sophia. "I gave you everything," I said. "I opened my home. I gave you my trust. And you took the one thing that should have been safe." She didn't respond. Just looked down. That was the moment it all broke. Not with screaming. Not with accusations. Just silence, the kind that settles into people when they realize they're being seen clearly for the first time. I left before anyone could follow me. As I drove away, my phone lit up with a notification. 15 missed calls. By morning, it would be 57. And by the end of the week, everyone they had tried to hide it from would know. Because I wasn't the one who had destroyed the illusion. They did that themselves. All I did was let the light in. That night, I lay on a friend's pull-out couch with a scratchy blanket pulled to my chin, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. At the dinner table. Her hands folded neatly over her stomach. His silence. The way no one moved when she said the words. I replayed everything. Every moment I'd dismissed, every instinct I'd pushed aside. All the times I caught a strange look and told myself I was being paranoid. All the ways I made excuses for both of them. I had enabled it, not because I was naive, but because I didn't want to believe that people I loved could be so calculated. I thought about the night she moved in, still crying from the wreckage of her marriage. Eli carried her boxes up the stairs. I made tea. We put fresh sheets on the guest bed and told her she'd be fine. She had a home. She had us. I thought about the night she stood in my kitchen, telling me I was lucky to have a man like Eli. The way she said it. The way I brushed it off as jealousy, not warning. I thought about him defending her, always, even when it made no sense. How he told me she was fragile. That I was imagining things. That she's your sister was a valid answer to every question. By morning, the weight in my chest hadn't lifted. It had only calcified. Turned into something cold and hard and permanent. I picked up my phone. Opened a group message that included his mother, his brother, his cousins, and 2 of his oldest friends. I typed one sentence. "You might want to ask Eli why my twin sister is pregnant." No context. No emotion. No explanation. I hit send and set the phone down. That single message became the match. The phone lit up within minutes. Messages came in, shock, confusion, disbelief. I didn't respond to any of them. Eli called first. At 6:08 a.m. I let it ring. He called again at 6:10. Again at 6:14. Then nonstop. By 10 a.m., I counted 24 missed calls. By 2 p.m., it was 41. By the end of the day, it reached 57. He left voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them. The previews on my screen were enough. "Claudia, please. Can we talk? I need to explain." But I didn't need explanations. I needed air. I left my friend's apartment once, just to walk. I had no destination. I didn't even bring headphones. I just needed to move. Something about being outside, with people around me who had no idea what was happening, made me feel normal for 10 minutes at a time. No one looked at me with pity. No one saw betrayal on my face. I was just another woman in a hoodie trying to stay warm. Back at the apartment, I avoided the news. I avoided texts. I let myself sit in the quiet. That night, I called only one person. My cousin Daniela. We weren't especially close, but she had been at the dinner. She hadn't said much during it, but I remembered the look on her face when Sophia made the announcement, stunned, but not surprised. Like she was putting pieces together in real time. When she picked up, she didn't say hello. She just said, "I'm so sorry." I didn't ask her why. I just let her talk. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I saw them once. 2 months ago. At a bar downtown. I was meeting a friend and I spotted them in a booth. They were sitting really close. She had her hand on his leg. It didn't look like a casual conversation. "Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't know what it was. And honestly, I didn't want to be the one to drop a bomb if I was wrong. I didn't blame her. I knew exactly what it felt like to doubt your own instincts. We talked for 20 minutes. She didn't try to offer advice. She just said, "You didn't deserve that." From either of them. That was enough. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. I started a new document. I titled it, "List of What I Know." And then I wrote, "She moved out without warning. He changed his passwords a month later. She went to his office once to bring him lunch. He lied about a dinner with a client the same night. She posted a selfie in that neighborhood. I found one of her earrings under the passenger seat of his car 2 weeks ago." None of those things were conclusive on their own. But together, they painted a picture that only a fool would deny. I had been many things in our marriage, forgiving, loyal, patient. But I was never a fool. By the 3rd day, I still hadn't returned any of his messages. He switched from guilt to anger. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not what you think. You don't understand the full story. Can we please talk like adults?" He wanted to meet in person. He said it wasn't fair to shut him out. That I was acting irrational. That he was still my husband. As if the title meant something after what he'd done. I didn't respond. But I did contact a lawyer. Her name was Meera Patel, a family law attorney recommended by another friend. When I sat down in her office, she handed me a glass of water and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I didn't cry. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she nodded and said, "You're doing the right thing. And we're going to protect everything that matters to you." It was the first time in days I felt steady. She outlined the steps. What filing would look like. What financial disclosure meant. What to expect if the pregnancy became part of a custody dispute down the line. I wasn't ready for all of it. But I needed to hear it anyway. On the way home, I stopped by my own house. I hadn't been back since Sunday. It felt different. Like someone had rearranged the air inside. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen, where we used to drink wine on Fridays. The living room, where we celebrated holidays with people who probably already knew. The bedroom, still made, as if it were waiting for someone. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing the essentials. He wasn't home. I didn't know where he was staying, and I didn't care. Before I left, I pulled a small box from the back of the closet. Inside was a photo from our wedding day, the one where I was laughing and he was looking at me like I was the whole world. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I missed that version of him, but because I needed to remind myself that once, this was real. It hadn't always been a lie, but it had ended as one. I put the photo back in the box. Closed it. Left it behind. On the front door, I taped a note. "You'll hear from my attorney by the end of the week. Do not contact me directly." No signature. I got in my car. Drove back to my friend's place. And for the first time since it all collapsed, I slept. Not because it was over, but because I had finally stopped protecting the wrong person and started protecting myself. Filing for divorce took less time than I expected. Meera had the paperwork ready within a few days. All I had to do was review, sign, and show up for the notary. I thought it would feel heavier, like signing away 15 years should physically sting. But it didn't. It felt clean. Like setting down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Before I left her office that morning, Meera looked me in the eye and said, freeze the accounts. Today, I did exactly that. Joint checking, savings, the credit cards in both our names. I took screenshots of balances, flagged recent transactions, and pulled every tax return from the last 5 years. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. I had been on autopilot in that marriage, handling most of the finances quietly, groceries, utilities, gift planning, appointments, while he managed bigger picture stuff like investments and taxes. But I'd always known the passwords. I just hadn't thought I'd need them this way. I sent them one message. Short. No explanation. No theatrics. You can explain yourselves to each other now. I'm done. Eli didn't reply. Not directly. Sophia did. The text came 5 minutes later. Claudia, don't do this. You're angry. I understand. But please don't let one mistake destroy everything. One mistake. That's what she called it. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading those words over and over. One mistake. As if my marriage had tripped and fallen into her womb by accident. I didn't reply. The next day, his mother called. I ignored it. Then she left a voicemail I eventually listened to, more out of curiosity than anything else. She sounded breathless, urgent. Claudia, sweetheart, I know this is hard, but we're all just trying to make sense of what happened. I'm sure there's more to the story. Please don't make any rash decisions. Eli's under a lot of pressure. There was a pause before she added, families survive worse than this. That was the moment I realized I wouldn't just be divorcing him, I'd be cutting loose an entire structure built on looking the other way. His brother texted too. Some variation of, we should all sit down. No one wants things to get ugly. But they were already ugly. I was just the first person willing to stop pretending. The thing that shocked me most in those early days wasn't the betrayal. It was the complete collapse of everything the moment I stepped away. All these people who had quietly benefited from me holding things together, emotionally, socially, logistically, suddenly didn't know what to do without me. Eli missed a client deadline the same week the accounts were frozen. His assistant called me, not realizing yet what had happened. He hasn't responded to emails, she said. The firm's not happy. I kept my voice neutral. I'm no longer involved in his schedule. She paused, then said, of course. Sorry. I didn't mean, but I had already hung up. By the following Monday, Mira had served him formally. He tried to call. I didn't answer. Then he tried his own version of damage control. He emailed me a list of assets he believed we should divide amicably. It was laughable, a half-hearted attempt to show he was being reasonable while conveniently downplaying anything valuable. I forwarded it to Mira. That afternoon, she replied, we'll be going through everything line by line. Don't respond directly to him. Let me handle it. So I did. Letting someone else fight for me felt strange at first, but necessary. I spent the next week moving into a temporary rental. A small 2-bedroom townhouse a few blocks from my office. Nothing fancy. Just clean and quiet and mine. I bought a second-hand couch and a cheap but decent mattress. My cousin Daniela came over with a toaster, a lamp, and a houseplant. Every new beginning needs greenery, she said, placing it on the kitchen windowsill. I stood in that space that night, looking around at my bare walls and mismatched furniture, and realized I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Eli and Sophia didn't know where I was staying. I intended to keep it that way. But I heard things. Through friends. Through mutual contacts. Through the subtle, but persistent ways people talk when they're not sure whose side to take yet. Eli had taken a leave of absence from the firm. Unpaid. The official story was family matters. But one of his colleagues, someone I'd spoken to at dozens of office parties, messaged me privately. He's unraveling. Not that it excuses anything, but he's not holding it together. Apparently the calls from his family hadn't stopped. One of his aunts messaged me on Facebook, a wall of text that started with, I can't imagine the pain you're in, and ended with, but perhaps there's a way for all of you to heal and move forward together. I deleted it without responding. They didn't understand. Or maybe they did and just didn't want to. I wasn't interested in healing with them. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lapse in judgment or a regrettable night. This was a sustained lie, made possible by both of them over months, maybe longer. I didn't know how far back it went. I didn't want to. What mattered was that it was over. I hadn't spoken to Sophia since her text. But I got updates through the same sideways channels. She was still pregnant. Still insisting she wasn't trying to steal anyone. Still framing the situation as complicated instead of destructive. One friend told me Sophia had started saying things like, "Eli's confused. He doesn't know what he wants." That wasn't confusion. That was cowardice. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding, slowly, quietly. I went back to work. Took on a new project. Said yes to drinks with coworkers. Started walking to the farmer's market on Saturdays again. The woman at the bread stall remembered my name. I almost cried when she said, "You're back." I didn't tell anyone about the divorce unless they asked directly. When they did, I didn't go into detail. He cheated, I'd say simply. With someone close to me. That was usually enough. There's something fascinating about how people respond to clean answers. Some look shocked. Some try to change the subject. But the ones who matter just nod and say, "I'm sorry." What do you need? I didn't need much. Just space. And quiet. And time. Eli continued trying to reach me, not every day, but regularly enough that I had to mute his contact. His last voicemail, which I did listen to weeks later, said this: "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I thought we could get through anything. I thought. I don't know. I miss you." It was a small voice. A boy's voice. Not the man I thought I'd married. And I realized then, I had been the adult in our relationship for a long time. The second I stepped out, the structure collapsed. Because I wasn't just his wife. I was the scaffolding. And without me, he didn't have much left to stand on. 3 weeks after I filed, Eli was fired. Not officially, of course. Not in writing. But he was asked to resign, which is corporate code for your reputation is no longer good for business. HR had received complaints. Someone had forwarded them screenshots, the family group message, snippets from my divorce filing, hearsay from people in his office who had started piecing things together. No one said it outright, but there was an understanding. His judgment had become a liability. I heard about it from a former colleague of his, someone I'd met at a holiday party once, who messaged me through LinkedIn of all places. She didn't say much, just, "I'm sorry about everything. I wanted you to know that people are finding out the truth. And you're not crazy." That part stuck with me. You're not crazy. It's strange how long that fear lingers, even after the facts are plain. He had lost the job he built his whole identity around. He had lost the house. He had lost me. And from what I could gather, he wasn't handling it well. His social media went silent. His brother told someone that he was staying with friends. I imagined him couch surfing, making promises to people who didn't know what to believe. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care enough to say it out loud. Sophia didn't fare much better. After the dust settled and it became clear I wasn't going to sweep this under the rug, she tried to regain some control. She reached out to a few mutual friends, people we'd known since childhood, people she thought might still be neutral. It didn't go well. Turns out, people have a hard time rallying behind a woman who announces at a family dinner that she's pregnant with her brother-in-law's child. Especially when she does it with a smile. Eventually, she moved back in with our parents. The story was that she needed support during the pregnancy, but everyone knew what it really meant. She was alone. And not the kind of alone that comes with quiet or clarity, the kind that comes when no one picks up the phone anymore. I didn't visit. I didn't call. I didn't send anything when she hit her 3rd trimester and posted a baby bump photo with a caption about starting a new chapter. There was no chapter that included me anymore. Meanwhile, I had started building something of my own. Not something grand or exciting. Just a small, steady life that belonged to me. My new place was tucked behind a row of brick townhouses, with ivy creeping up the back fence and a porch light that flickered every few nights. The floors creaked. The water pressure wasn't perfect. But it was quiet. It was clean. And it was mine. I bought secondhand furniture. A velvet armchair that squeaked when you shifted your weight. A wobbly dining table I fixed with wood glue and determination. I painted one wall navy blue and didn't ask anyone's opinion. I hung up a piece of art I'd never had space for in the old house, a simple print of a woman standing alone in a field, her back to the viewer. There was something peaceful about her. I started sleeping through the night again. Not every night. Not perfectly. But the kind of sleep where you wake up and don't immediately feel like you're bracing for something. That was new. There were hard days, of course. Grocery shopping was strange at first. I'd spent 15 years buying for two. I kept reaching for things out of habit, the cereal he liked, the protein bars she used to grab. I had to teach myself to cook for one and to stop setting two plates without thinking. But in that quiet, I found room to breathe. And more than that, I found space to listen to myself again. I started running in the mornings. Just around the block at first, slowly, music in one ear. It wasn't about fitness. It was about motion. Proving to myself that I could get up and move forward, even when it still felt heavy. A few weeks after Eli lost his job, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Sophia's. I stared at it for hours before I opened it. It was short. Barely a page. She didn't apologize. Not directly. She said she missed me. That she never meant to hurt me like this. That things had gotten out of control and she didn't know how to stop. That she thought, eventually, I'd understand. There was a photo inside. An ultrasound. No caption. No explanation. I placed it on the counter and walked away. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because there was nothing left to say. Any conversation would have required a version of her that no longer existed, or maybe had never existed at all. Eli emailed me once around that same time. No subject line. Just a single paragraph about wanting to talk, maybe meet, just to clear the air. I forwarded it to my lawyer. I kept things quiet, but that didn't mean I was passive. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about boundaries. And dignity. And air. I had spent so long choking on the small betrayals I couldn't name. All those little compromises. The jokes I laughed off. The silences I explained away. I didn't realize until I was alone just how much of myself I'd given up trying to hold that life together. Now, I had mornings with no expectation. Nights with no performance. The space between those two became mine again. I made new rituals. Coffee at the window with the sun barely up. A local bookstore I visited every Thursday. Fresh flowers from the corner shop every weekend, even if they only lasted 3 days. They made the space feel alive. I stopped checking their social media. I stopped wondering if he would come to his senses or if she would regret any of it. It wasn't about them anymore. They had chosen their path. I was choosing mine. One that didn't require forgiveness I hadn't been offered or explanations I didn't need. Just quiet. And breath. And the understanding that peace doesn't always come wrapped in closure. Sometimes, it's just what's left when you walk away and decide not to turn back. It was late spring when she reached out again. I remember because the trees outside my window had just started blooming, that too early burst of green that always feels like a false promise. I was making dinner when my phone buzzed on the counter. No contact name, just a number I hadn't blocked, though I probably should have. It was a picture. An ultrasound. And beneath it, one line, "You're still her aunt." No apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what had happened, just a thin thread, dangled carefully, as if to say, "See? There's still something between us." I didn't respond. I stared at the screen for a long time. The black and white image stared back. Grainy and impersonal. I couldn't make out much, just the soft shape of something forming. A child I hadn't asked for. A child born of betrayal. A child who, biologically at least, was now part of me whether I wanted it or not. But that message, it wasn't about the baby. Not really. It was about her. It was about control. She wanted me to open the door again, just enough. Not to make things right, but to prove to herself that things hadn't broken completely. That there was still some version of me that would come back, fold in, play my role. I put the phone face down. And then I finished chopping vegetables. It wasn't the first message she'd sent since the fallout, but it was the most deliberate. After her last text, Don't let one mistake destroy everything. She had gone quiet. Probably because she realized silence could be weaponized too. If she disappeared long enough, maybe I'd start to wonder. Start to miss her. Start to rewrite the past into something more forgivable. But grief doesn't work like that. Neither does healing. If anything, the space had clarified everything. Over the months, I had rebuilt my routines. Not just to stay busy, to stay sane. I joined a Saturday yoga class where no one knew anything about my life. I started going to the same coffee shop every morning before work, where the barista eventually learned my name and my order. I said yes to more invitations, more walks, more movies I wasn't sure I'd enjoy. Some days were better than others, but the thing that surprised me most was how possible it all felt. Starting over. Slowly. Without fanfare. I wasn't trying to erase what happened. I was just learning to exist beyond it. And yet, the message brought it all back. Not the pain, exactly, but the proximity of it. The reminder that while I was building something new, she was still tethered to a version of me that no longer existed. The one who would have forgiven her. The one who would have showed up at the hospital with balloons. The one who would have held the baby and said, "It's okay. We're still family." She didn't get that version anymore. Because here's the thing about trust. Once it's broken, it doesn't just knit itself back together. It's not a wound that closes with time. It's more like a mirror that's been shattered. You can glue it back if you really want to, but the cracks will always show. And some people don't even bring the glue. They just hold out a shard and ask you to pretend it's the whole thing. She wanted forgiveness without repair. But that's not how this works. There had been no apology. No explanation. Just a photo, sent to remind me that I was still tied to her whether I liked it or not. And in a purely technical sense, she wasn't wrong. I was still her aunt. But that didn't mean I owed her a relationship. It didn't mean I had to pretend her choices hadn't detonated something permanent. It didn't mean I had to pretend that child was a bridge between us instead of a consequence. A few weeks after the message, I mentioned it briefly to my therapist. I said I wasn't sure how to feel. That maybe I should have felt something more immediate, anger, sadness, guilt. But mostly, I just felt distance. Like someone watching a fire burn down a house they'd already left. She nodded. "You've already grieved the relationship," she said. "Now you're just watching what's left of it crumble." That felt accurate. Some days, I thought about the baby. Not often, and not in the way Sophia probably imagined. But occasionally. I wondered if it would look like her or like him. I wondered what story she would be told about where she came from. I wondered if, one day, I'd meet her, and if I did, what I'd say. Not because I felt any urge to step in, but because I was old enough now to know that nothing stays hidden forever. And that when people grow up and start asking questions, they deserve something more than silence. But if that meeting ever happens, it won't be for Sophia. It'll be on my terms. With boundaries she no longer gets to cross. Boundaries she doesn't even get to ask about anymore. One of the most freeing parts of the last year had been realizing I could decide who had access to me. I used to think family was automatic, that you kept showing up no matter what, that forgiveness was a requirement instead of a choice. But I've learned that love without respect is just control dressed up as obligation. And I'm not interested in relationships built on obligation anymore. I have a small circle now. Tighter. Quieter. But deeply solid. Friends who don't ask for the whole story, but who always make space when I need to say something out loud. A neighbor who texts me to bring in my mail when it rains. A coworker who brings an extra sandwich on Mondays because she accidentally made two. It's not the life I had before. It's better. Because I know what's real now. I know what it costs to give everything and be betrayed in return. And I know what it looks like to walk away from that, not burning bridges for drama, but walking calmly, without looking back. That message, that ultrasound, was the last time I heard from her. I didn't block her number. I didn't respond. I just let the silence be my answer. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It's been a year. 12 months since the Sunday dinner that ended everything I thought was stable in my life. Since the silence that followed her announcement, the 57 missed calls, the cold clarity of starting over. People keep asking if I'm okay now, if I've moved on, like healing is a place you arrive at. I don't say yes. I say this. I'm not bitter, I'm clear. There's a difference. I used to confuse the two. I thought letting go had to come with forgiveness. That if you weren't smiling about the past, it meant you were stuck in it. But what I've learned is that clarity is better than closure. You don't need everyone to understand or agree. You just need to stop twisting yourself into something small enough to be accepted by people who never respected you in the first place. I live differently now. Not drastically, but with more intention. The townhouse is still mine. I finally replaced the flickering porch light. I planted herbs in pots along the windowsill, thyme, rosemary, basil. Things I can tend to, even when life gets noisy. I host game nights now, small ones, just a few friends at a time. No pressure. No performance. Just real connection. I started therapy about 6 months ago. I walked in thinking we'd talk about them, Eli and Sophia, but most of what we unpacked had to do with me. How I learned to overfunction early. How I made myself indispensable to people so I wouldn't be abandoned by them. How I took on other people's messes because fixing them made me feel useful. It was uncomfortable at first. Then it was freeing. Because once I stopped trying to protect people who had hurt me, I had all this space. Space I didn't know what to do with at first. But over time, it filled in with better things. I joined a hiking group. Just once a month, nothing intense. I'm not trying to summit anything. I just like being outside, moving my body, talking to people who don't know the story unless I choose to tell it. I said yes to a conference out of town. I presented for the first time in years. The night before, I stayed up too late practicing in front of a mirror. But when I stood at that podium and spoke, I wasn't thinking about Eli or Sophia. I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking, I'm good at this. And I almost forgot. They're still together, from what I hear. On and off, depending on who's telling the story. He never got another job in his field. Reputation matters in circles that small, and no one wants to take a risk on a man who blew up his marriage and imploded his team in the same quarter. Word got around. HR departments are more connected than people think. He freelances now. Sophia posts vague updates, filtered photos of brunch, the baby in matching outfits, captions about the journey. But I don't follow her. I only see the posts when someone sends them to me, and even then, I rarely look. I don't wish them harm. But I also don't wish them well. I don't spend time wondering if they're happy. Because the truth is, even if they are, it doesn't undo what happened. And I'm not trying to rewrite the story to make it more palatable. She still insists she didn't mean for this to happen. I believe her. I believe she didn't plan to fall in love with my husband. I believe she didn't intend to get pregnant. But intent doesn't erase impact. And forgiveness isn't a right, it's a process. One she never even bothered to start. She wanted grace without grief. A shortcut to reconciliation. But I'm done carrying people who hand me the knife and ask why I'm bleeding. When people show you who they are over and over in different ways, believe them. The flippant remarks, the stolen moments, the slow distancing followed by entitlement. It's not random. It's a pattern. And the lesson I take with me now is this. Trust your gut. Even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. Because I saw the signs. Not all of them, not clearly, but enough. And I explained them away because she was my sister. My twin. The person who looked most like me in the world. But closeness doesn't equal loyalty. Shared DNA isn't a contract. Sometimes the person who looks most like you is the one who betrays you the deepest. Because they know exactly where to aim. And you never think you have to protect yourself from them. That's what makes it cut so clean. Still, not everything about that year was painful. Some of it, strangely, was beautiful. There's a kind of self-trust that grows when you walk through something that should have broken you and come out clearer. I don't second-guess myself as much anymore. I don't over-explain. I say no when I mean no. I ask for help when I need it. I'm still learning, but I like who I'm becoming. Last month I hosted a dinner. Just 5 people. Simple food, good wine, easy laughter. At one point, someone asked if I had any siblings. I paused. I have a twin, I said. Then I changed the subject. That was enough. I don't know if I'll ever meet the child. Maybe one day. Maybe when she's older and curious and ready to ask her own questions. If that day comes, I'll decide then. On my terms. with clear boundaries. Because that child didn't ask for any of this. But I'm not stepping back into that fire just because someone else refuses to feel the heat. This is what peace looks like, at least for me. Not forgetting. Not forgiving what hasn't been earned. Just living. Fully. Quietly. Unapologetically. And never again mistaking being needed for being loved. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. Have you ever had to cut off someone you once considered family? What was the moment you knew it was time to walk away? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this hit close to home, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, betrayal, and rebuilding on your own terms. Until next time, protect your peace.